Hello, good afternoon everyone.
And good afternoon too to our beloved lecturer, Ma'am Tiarma.
We are from Group 5. Here, we would like to discuss our topic
from Chapter 4, from page 67 to 84,
with the title A New View of Research, Research Within Practice Tradition, from the book
The Action Research Planner by Stephen Chemis, Robin McTaggart,
and Rhonda Dixon. So, let's go to the next video. Hello guys, now before we present our presentation, I will introduce myself. My name is Eliza Napitupulu and my academic number is 171200007. And now I will explain the first is about the what's critical about critical participatory action research. And in these topics, I will explain about the aims of critical participatory action research. The first aims of this research is to help the people to understand and to transform the way while they are doing their practices. And the second is to help the people to transform their understanding around their practices. And the next is to help participants to transform their conduct of their practices and more productive, sustainable, and also inclusive. And the last one is to help the participant to transform their condition under which they are doing the practices. That is, will be more rational and comprehensible. And next is I will explain about the steps that must be followed while we are doing this critical participatory. The first is we must understand how things work here. We must know how things have come to be, what kind of consequences that might be happen when we are doing this research. And the second is we adopt a critical stance towards what happens. And the next is we make our conversation becomes more practical and focused. So while we are doing this critical participatory action research, we talk, we communicate to each other around about the topic, about the research or participatory action research that will be done by us. And the next is X to transform our practices, our understanding of our practices, and the condition under which we practice. So in here we practice as we will do the research. So we imagine what can we do next. And the last one is we make a document or monitor what happens to see if we are now preventing, avoiding, or ameliorating the untoward consequences of our previous ways of working. So in here we must make a document. We make what thing that we can do while in order to make the research based to can achieve our goals and our purpose of this research. And the second and the next is I will explain about the characteristic of critical participatory action research. So the characteristic of this research is that make this research different with other is the participatory action research is taken about understanding of how our circumstances, our situation, and how to change things down. That is avoiding things that cause dissatisfaction. So in here, we must be understand our circumstances. In participatory action research, we can imitate the other research. So in here, we must be truly do this research. We can imitate the other. And the second is this research collect evidence and documents our practices to learn how to deal with the perceived dissatisfaction and not to produce the one best method to do something. So in here, we know to do that. We can be do the thing the good method in our research. So but we must be we collect the research by evidence that as well as we can in order to achieve the purpose of doing this research. And the next is not very interested in data or say scientifics to gather the evidence that show us how we did it. So the interesting not this research not interesting by show the data the data in form of scientifics, but in this research. So by we give the picture, we make the what we do in this step, So we not only to say this is this research, this is the research, not, but we show the others, we show the readers about the process step by step. And the next is work through the conversation involved between them. Not speak several pre-flash position, but in this here we speak each other about the we say about the issues of the other, but we know because we search it. We know because we analyze it. This is the important thing, the characteristic of this research. And the next is aims to raise questions, stimulate conversation, and to help people to change themselves, their practices, and understanding of their practice and the condition while we are doing this research. And the next is I will explain about the research perspective in critical participatory action research. There are two kinds dimension of this research. The first is the individual social dimension, and the second is the objective subjective dimension. This is almost same, but in the individual social dimension, the researcher focus on the individual or social structure, but in objective subjective dimension, the researcher focus on the describe the behavior on the participant that do this research. I think like that, and the next will be continued by my friend.
Hello everyone, my name is Febi Sulistia, academic number 17120029. I will continue our presentation and I will explain about critical participatory action research as a kind of research. Chemists and McTaggart provide a framework showing how practice is viewed in different research traditions as first, the individual performances, events, and effects, which constitute practice as it is viewed from the objective, external perspective of an outsider, or we can say as individual objective. Second, the wider social and material condition and interaction which constitute a social practice as it is viewed from the objective, external perspective of an outsider, and we can say as social objective. Third, the intentions, meaning, and values, which constitute practice as it is viewed from the subjective, internal perspective of individual practitioners themselves, as individual subjective. Fourth, the language, discourses, and traditions, which constitute practice as it is viewed from the subjective, internal social perspective of member of the participant own discourses community who must represent, describe, interpret, evaluate practices in order to talk about and develop them, as social subjective. Fifth, the change and evolution of practice, taking into account all four of the aspects of practice just mentioned, which comes into view when it is understood by participants and reflexively restructured and transformed over time. It is historical dimension. The first four of this perspective on practice lead to familiar research approaches and technique. We can see table 4.3 views of practice and these research approaches that imply. There are two: focus perspective, objective, subjective, based, individual, and the social. Base focus perspective objective in the individual practice as individual behaviors, and base focus perspective objective in the social practice as social and system behavior. In focus perspective subjective in the individual practice as intentional actions called intentional actions, and base focus subjective in the social practice as socially structured, shaped by discourses and traditions. Base focus perspective both a reflexive dialectical view of subjective, objective relations and connection. Focus perspective both in the individual and the social practice as socially and historically constitute and as reconstituted by human agency and social actions by participants. And next slide. There are 5 standpoints in research together. I take 3 points. First, people saying in one about their practices and the culture discursive arrangement that make their practices possible. Second, how we might look at the doing of people practices and the material economic arrangements their resources and support what they do. Third, how we might look at the relating of their practices and the social political arrangements that make possible those way of relating to one another and the world. So we can see table 4.4 suggests that it is possible to collect evidence about all of these things from each of these 5 standpoints. Base focus perspective objective in the individual practice as individual behaviors, and focus perspective objective in the social practice as social and system behaviors. Base focus perspective subjective in the individual practice as intentional action, and base focus perspective subjective in the social practice as socially structured, shaped by discourses and tradition. The evidence in previous table can help us to enter the living dialectic of exploring the relationship between our individual actions, understanding, and relationship with others, and how our action and understanding and relationship are part of and help to construct the cultural discursive, material, economic, and social political arrangements that enable and constrain to collective practices in, for example, a community, a school, a classroom, a staff room. Connecting, comparing, and contrasting views in the individual social dimensions creates a dialogue between things we experience individually and things we experience collectively. Chemists describe what we experience collectively in terms of the intersubjective spaces or semantic space, psychical space, time, and social space in which we encounter one another. And next, we'll continue by my friends.
Hello everyone, my name is Uli Sylphia Simanjuntak. My academic number is 17120014. So here I would like to explain to you guys about the researching practice from within practice traditions. Of course, it's still as a point of chapter 4. So without any further ado, let's take for the first point. For the first point, it said that research focuses on studying the nature and also the consequences of our own practice. So here, the sections of critical participatory action research also focuses to studying the nature and also the consequences of our own practice. And for the second is, we study the nature and consequences of our own practice not as a single researcher, but as a participant in the public sphere. So it means like, in these kinds of research, we have to realize that when we do this research, we are not only as a researcher, but also as a participant in the public sphere. The third is, all historically shaped by our own actions and those of others in the past that have survived to the present. And for the fourth point is, we will continue to reproduce our practices, understanding, and their condition in the present form. So here we have to realize that what have been formed in the past, we have to keep it, we have to let it into the future. And for the fifth point is, aim to take individual and collective responsibility. So what does it mean? It means like here we have to realize, we have to aware that every practice have consequences that may be faced by us as a researcher. And for the sixth is taking responsibility for our own practice. For the seventh is avoid generating unintended consequences. And for the eighth point is taking a critical view. So here taking a critical view means like interpreting and exploring our practices, our understanding, and our condition. Alright, there are about some points, and now we move to the next part that is tell about the two functions by seeing our practice, our understanding, and the condition in which we practice have historically shaped, been formed, and can be transformed through individual and social action. So there are two functions, as I said before. For the first, it allows us to find how through our agents we will reproduce our practices, understanding, and also the conditions. That is about the first point. And the second point is to find that when these things here means like our practice, our understandings, and the condition are irrational or unconditional, and unproductive or unsustainable, and also unfair or not, like such as like that. And here I give the example, and the example took from the book also. It said that the Brighton High School find ways to intervene in school life and their communities to change some of the local conditions. So from the book we can see to make you clearly that the Brighton High School have do the practice like 1,000 times upwards. But is it a one time that make a change and intervene to make a difference, such as like that? And now we move to critical participatory action research is intended as a cure for the professionalization. So here I will explain straightly. In education field, it invitation to professionalize local education and revitalize local education by teachers, students, and also others. So here it means like in education field, it makes like it invite participants to the interrogate to involve to our research, like teacher, students, and of their practice of educating. And also the second one is inviting them to transform their practice, their understanding, and also their conditions and in which they practice. And next is using the practice architecture's analysis table to find a field concern that will be the focus of a critical participatory action research initiative. So here there is a way to start exploring issues, and also might help us to be a tools and focus to joint research in action. We can see in the table in the chapter 4 about using the practice architecture's analysis table to make you feel like have a clear explanation. And we move to the last one. There are some points that we have to remember that relate to the context of the table. For the first is it rational and reasonable? So it means like, is it our research has been feel like rational or reasonable? And the second one is this productive and sustainable? Productive and sustainable, it makes like our research have productive to be read by someone, or is it feel like sustainable enough? And for the third is this fair and inclusive? So here there are 3 points. And so with the 3 points here, I also want to tell you guys that a good participatory action research here is good for recording what evidence we draw to answer the questions. For example, like how much and what kind of the evidence do we need? So here we need to consider every general question that asked to us and that relate to our research, and to reduce our initial daily dependence on our own informal observation. That's all about last part. That's all about last part of chapter 4. Thank you.